In the news tonight, His Majesty condemns an attack by al-Shabaab on a Kenyan university as terrorist and cowardly, and the Kenyan President says he would do everything to root out radical elements in the country. UNRWA describes the situation in the Palestinian Yarmouk camp as an affront to humanity and a source of universal shame as Daesh takes control of almost all the camp on the outskirts of Damascus. But for those who missed it, the next one occurs in September. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty King Abdullah condemned as a terrorist and cowardly attack the storming by gunmen of the Garissa University in Kenya that took about 150 innocent lives and wounded dozens. His Majesty called Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta to offer his condolences and offer sympathy to the families of the victims. He also reiterated Jordan's solidarity with Kenya and its friendly people in facing such heinous terrorist crimes that threaten the security and stability of the region and the world. King Abdullah and Kenyatta also discussed current regional and international developments, particularly efforts to address the threat of terrorism. Today, the Somali radical group al-Shabaab vowed to wage a long war against the country and run its cities red with blood 2 days after the university attack. On Thursday, 4 al-Shabaab gunmen executed students in a campus in Garissa, putting the country on heightened alert amid survivors' horror testimonies. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta said al-Shabaab will not be able to create an Islamic caliphate in Kenya. In a televised speech, he said Kenya would do everything to defend their way of life and called for rooting out radical elements. Here's an excerpt.
We tell those that believe a caliphate is possible in Kenya that we are one indivisible, sovereign and democratic state. That fact will never change. Our forefathers bled and died for this nation, and we will do everything to defend our way of life. The radicalization that breeds terrorism is not conducted in the bush at night. It occurs in the full glare of day, in homes, in madrasas, and in mosques with rogue imams. We must ask the question, where are the parents and families of those who are being radicalized? Where is the community leadership? Where is the political leadership? Where is the religious leadership? The government must get the information and cooperation of all these parties if we are to effectively combat the terrorists.
And in the continued fight against terrorism, the US-led coalition conducted 15 airstrikes against Daesh terrorists in Iraq and Syria during the past 24 hours. A US military statement said Daesh targets near Mosul and Baji were hit in 9 attacks since yesterday, while in Syria 5 airstrikes were carried out near the northern border town of Kobani and 1 near Hasaka. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider alAbadi said armies in the region around Iraq have no chance of defeating Daesh if the terrorist group continued to recruit ideologically indoctrinated foreign fighters. In an interview with German magazine Der Spiegel, Abadi said around 57% of Daesh terrorists were Iraqis, but they did not cause any problems as they simply ran away when Iraqi troops entered towns. It is the remaining 43% who are foreign fighters, he said, who have been indoctrinated ideologically, who have their backs up against the wall. Abadi said government security authorities needed to take action to protect young people from Daesh in the same way they trace child pornography networks around the world. On the ground in Iraq, meanwhile, Shiite paramilitaries started leaving Tikrit this afternoon following a government deal with the Shiite fighters. Locals in Tikrit had complained that some fighters looted the city after helping retake it from Daesh. Head of the Council of Tikrit said the paramilitaries started to leave the city towards the surrounding areas outside, adding that the looting and vandalism against residents' properties stopped today. The decision for the paramilitaries to exit came after a meeting between Prime Minister Haider alAbadi and officials from Salahuddin province. And in Syria, Daesh terrorists have taken control of 90% of the Palestinian Yarmouk refugee camp on the outskirts of Damascus. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said Daesh and alQaeda Syrian wing, the Nusra Front, made gains overnight when they pushed into the northeast of the district close to central Damascus. Head of the PLO in Syria, Taysir Abu Bakr, said Daesh killed 21 people, including fighters and civilians, since yesterday, and kidnapped at least 74 people. Some families are trying to exit the camp, but Daesh terrorists are positioned on rooftops of high buildings, making it difficult for anyone to leave. UNRWA spokesman described the situation in Yarmouk as an affront to humanity and a source of universal shame. Syrian government officials, meanwhile, said the army have encircled the camp. Over to Yemen, where tribesmen in pickup trucks entered the eastern port town of Mella to drive out suspected al-Qaeda fighters who took control of the town on Thursday. The fighters are part of a tribal alliance in the eastern Hadramaut province, which pledged to restore security after radical armed groups seized Mella, where they ransacked buildings, broke into banks, and freed prisoners. The Saudi-led alliance continues to launch airstrikes against Houthi rebels to stem their advances and to support President Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi, who is now in Saudi Arabia after fleeing Aden a week ago. The International Committee of the Red Cross, meanwhile, called for an immediate 24-hour halt to hostilities in Yemen to deliver life-saving medical aid into the country. The Red Cross said in a statement that all air, land, and sea routes must be opened without delay for at least 24 hours to enable help to reach people cut off after more than a week of intense airstrikes and fierce ground fighting nationwide. In the Egyptian capital, 2 improvised explosive devices detonated near Ajiza's Mbaba police station but caused no casualties. Preliminary investigations showed that the bombs were planted close to a nearby school and targeted police vehicles. The bombs shattered the glass of the school and damaged 1 police vehicle. We stay with Egypt, where a Cairo court adjourned to the 29th, the first session of the retrial of former President Hosni Mubarak and his 2 sons over corruption charges. The 3 men stand accused of diverting public funds earmarked for the renovation of presidential palaces to upgrade family properties. Last May, Mubarak was sentenced to 3 years in jail, while his sons Ala and Jamal were each given 4-year jail terms after being found guilty of embezzling public funds and forging official documents. But in January, Egypt's Court of Cassation accepted an appeal by Mubarak's lawyers against the sentences and ordered a retrial. A newly negotiated framework for a nuclear pact with Iran is a good deal, said U.S. President Barack Obama, as he sought public support for a diplomatic breakthrough with Tehran, opposed by some in Congress. Speaking in his weekly radio address, Obama said it's a deal that meets our core objectives, including strict limitations on Iran's program and cutting off every pathway that Iran could take to develop a nuclear weapon. The White House hopes support from the U.S. public for its negotiating efforts will help sway skeptical lawmakers, and over the coming weeks and months, Obama and administration officials will be engaged in a difficult sales pitch.
As we engage in this debate, let's remember, we really only have 3 options for dealing with Iran's nuclear program. Bombing Iran's nuclear facilities, which will only set its program back a few years while starting another war in the Middle East. Abandoning negotiations and hoping for the best with sanctions, even though that's always led to Iran making more progress in its nuclear program. Or a robust and verifiable deal like this one, that peacefully prevents Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. As President and Commander-in-Chief, I firmly believe that the diplomatic option, a comprehensive long-term deal like this, is by far the best option for the United States, for our allies, and for the world.
His Royal Highness Crown Prince Hussein will chair a Security Council session on the 23rd of this month on the role of youth in countering violent extremism and promoting peace. President of the Security Council for April and permanent representative of Jordan to the United Nations, Dina Qawar, said the session will be held at a ministerial level of the permanent representatives who were invited by the Council to take part. Prince Hussein is involved in many youth activities, and according to Qawar, the meeting is most important for him at the international level. Sky watchers were in for a treat today as a nearly 5-minute total lunar eclipse, the first of 2015, was observed at sunrise. Eclipses occur 2 or 3 times per year when the sun, earth and the full moon line up so that the moon passes. France's lower house of parliament passed a measure banning excessively thin fashion models and exposing agencies and the fashion houses that hire them to possible fines and even jail. The measure is a part of a wider crackdown on anorexia backed by President François Hollande's government. Lawmakers also approved a separate measure making it illegal to condone anorexia, a move targeting internet sites that encourage dangerous weight loss. Under the controversial bill, which was criticized by some for giving foreign models an advantage in the industry, French models will have to undergo medical assessments.
Get to work can't be delivered to people who are undernourished and who are therefore putting their lives and health in danger.
In La Liga news, Real Madrid prepare to face Granada at home tomorrow in a match Carlo Ancelotti says his team has no room to fail at. Real are second in La Liga with 10 games left, 4 points behind leaders Barcelona, while Granada are in relegation position at 19. James Rodriguez will be at the starting lineup after being out for 2 months with a broken bone in his foot. But Sami Khedira, Dani Carvajal and Pepe would be rested. Real Madrid still have games at home to Rayo Vallecano and Eibar before they play at Atletico Madrid in the first leg of their Champions League quarter-final on the 14th. And Barcelona returned from the international break looking to take full advantage of success. Leading La Liga with 68 points, they are adamant to protect their advantage when they face Celta Vigo tomorrow, and any sloppy performance over the next 10 games will open the door to Real once again. Barca coach Luis Enrique said Lionel Messi will be fit to play the match after missing both of Argentina's games while on international duty, suffering an injured foot. Celta Vigo are in 11th place. And finally, relatively cold weather prevails in most regions tonight with partly cloudy skies and northwesterly moderate winds. A slight rise in temperature is expected tomorrow, creating fair conditions in most parts and moderate in the Jordan Valley. Winds will be southeasterly light. In the Gulf of Aqaba, a high of 30 degrees is in the forecast with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. His Majesty condemns an attack by al-Shabaab on a Kenyan university as terrorist and cowardly, and the Kenyan President says he would do everything to root out radical elements in the country. UNRWA describes the situation in the Palestinian Yarmouk camp as an affront to humanity and a source of universal shame as Daesh takes control of almost all the camp on the outskirts of Damascus. And sky watchers were in for a treat today as a nearly 5-minute total lunar eclipse, the first of 2015, was observed at sunrise. But for those who missed it, the next one occurs in September. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm alAbadi. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.